In South Central L.A., a kid earns a name that sounds like a rumor, Monster, not because it's catchy, but because, by his own account, cops looked at a beaten, disfigured robbery victim and said whoever did that was a monster. The neighborhood repeats it, the set adopts it, and Kody Scott grows up chasing it until the nickname becomes a reputation he can't outrun. Years later, while incarcerated, that same monster Kody writes the story that made him infamous, credited under the name Sanyika Shakur as he tries to bury the myth. Legend says he was pure evil. Reality is messier, a child shaped by a street system that rewards cruelty and a man who claimed he wanted out. Tonight we separate the legend, the fear, and the facts. Kody DeJohn Scott was born in Los Angeles in November 1963 and grew up in South Central as the Crips fractured into competing sets and street identity became life or death. In his own telling, he was jumped into the Eight Tray Gangster Crips the night of his 6th grade graduation, about 11, then pushed into proving himself around older members. By 13, he carried the nickname that would shadow him for decades, Monster. The common origin story is that he beat a robbery victim so badly the person was left disfigured. And according to Scott's account, police on scene said whoever did it was a monster. Scott later framed it as a moment where a name became an expectation. Even the people who covered him noticed the contradiction. Journalist Leon Bing, who helped introduce him to readers outside LA, described him as an avid reader with a sharp mind. By the early 1990s, Scott was incarcerated, having taken the name Sanyika Shakur in prison in the 1980s and writing the memoir Monster, published in 1993. On paper, Kody Scott was already deep into the system: juvenile camps, youth authority, then adult prison. By 21, he'd been convicted of assault with a firearm and sent to Soledad, one more stop in a circuit that ran through places like Folsom and San Quentin. But the monster story people trade on the internet usually skips an uncomfortable detail. Even the reporters profiling him in the early 1990s noted he'd never been convicted of murder. That doesn't erase the fear, because in his own writing he describes shootings, assaults, robberies, and gang missions, and he portrays it like a war where nobody walks away clean. Those are his claims on the page, not courtroom verdicts. The turning point comes after he gets out, and then gets pulled right back in. According to a major 1993 profile, Scott was paroled in 1988. By then, he'd converted to Islam, changed his name to Sanyika Shakur, joined the new African independence movement, and renounced gang membership for revolution. But in January 1991, he was arrested again after a brutal beating and robbery that also involved stealing a vehicle. He was charged with assault, robbery, and grand theft auto. He ultimately pleaded guilty to the robbery charge in exchange for a 7-year sentence, and by the time of that profile, he was serving it in Pelican Bay State Prison. And inside that steel and concrete box, he finds something gangs can't give you: control of the narrative. In March 1992, he begins writing what becomes Monster. He tells people on the outside he's not writing to brag. He's writing because watching Los Angeles erupt in 1992 made him feel like it was time to speak on young black men dying in the streets. The publishing world bites hard. Rights get picked up with major buzz, and when the book drops in 1993, it's treated as a rare from the inside document of South Central gang life. It also sparks backlash, because if you platform the monster, are you explaining the violence or rewarding it? Either way, the switch has flipped. Kody Scott is no longer just a feared name in the neighborhood. Now he's a public symbol, half cautionary tale, half controversy, trying to convince the world that the man writing in a cell is not the same person who earned that nickname in the first place. When Monster hit the world, it didn't just shock readers, it turned Kody Scott into a public problem. Critics argued the book felt like a justification, like he was explaining away years of blood. Others said the value was exactly that it didn't sanitize anything. It showed what the street rewards and what it destroys. Either way, the Monster brand went from a neighborhood warning to a national talking point. And then the comeback started slipping. In 1996, police arrested Scott after he'd been on the run from parole agents who wanted to drug test him. The irony is brutal. He wasn't caught in some Hollywood chase. He was caught while signing autographs on a South Central porch, his own book jacket posted on a station wall like a wanted poster. He reportedly told officers he didn't mind going back because prison meant time to write. A decade later, the same pattern shows up again. In early 2007, the Los Angeles Times reported Scott had turned in a novel manuscript and that a film adaptation of his life was still being discussed. Writers LAPD put him on a top 10 most wanted gang members list over an alleged burglary, carjacking incident. One officer summed it up cold: he couldn't get away. In May 2008, an Associated Press report says Scott, also known as Sanyika Shakur, was sentenced to 6 years in state prison for a 2006 carjacking after pleading no contest. Prosecutors described a beating tied to the case. His attorney disputed the severity and said Scott took the deal because, as a felon, he faced the nightmare math of California's 3 strikes law. By 2019, public radio in California was covering his release again. Still famous, still complicated, still insisting he was monster no more. And then comes the ending nobody scripts. In June 2021, he was found dead in a tent at a homeless encampment near the San Luis Rey River Trail in Oceanside. Police said it appeared to be natural causes and not foul play, though the cause was initially pending. Later reporting and reference sources list a stroke. That's the aftermath, not a movie ending, just the long, grinding consequence of a life spent bouncing between myth, prison gates, and the street. Monster Kody is a nickname that sells because it's simple. It gives us a villain, a warning label, a way to keep the chaos at arm's length. But the real story is what happens when a child gets rewarded for being feared. When violence becomes currency and reputation becomes survival. Kody Scott tried to rewrite himself as Sanyika Shakur. In prison, he converted to Islam and changed his name. Later reporting described it as marking a rebirth and the end of his gang career. His book became a go-to from the inside account for outsiders trying to understand gang life, and it forced people to admit the obvious. The street doesn't just produce victims, it manufactures perpetrators too. But reform isn't a speech, it's a timeline, and his timeline kept snapping back. Parole, arrest, prison, release, and the myth following him like a shadow. In the end, the monster didn't die in a headline shootout. He was found in a tent in Oceanside in June 2021. Another reminder that the street legend and the real life rarely match. Police said it appeared to be natural causes and not foul play, with the cause pending at the time. Later, the San Diego County Medical Examiner listed a stroke. So here's the reality: the nickname was never the point. The point is the system that makes a boy believe he has to become one to matter, and how hard it is to come back from that.